and this is important. I think for many years, when I started teaching in the university way back in 1986, we knew that most people who had gone through the 844 system had no questions and no answers. And so I'm impressed that we have very good discussions taking place, and this is vital. This kind of interaction is very, very critical in learning from one another and in growing as academicians and as researchers. The questioning aspect is critical, is a sign of critical thinking and creativity. Because people who are not creative may not question anything. They will accept whatever comes. But there is also the dimension of innovativeness and creativity. By being able to develop solutions to pertinent problems, it is a sign of innovativeness and creativity on the part of our academicians. And we all know that both of these take time. They take time, they take effort, they take a lot of patience to be able to develop a culture of questioning, to develop a culture of innovativeness and creativity as an academician. A great step that I see here by a new generation. But what I would want to say is, as a different generation, don't go at the same pace as the previous generation. I think the previous generation went too slowly. And many of them today, they cannot adapt to the changes that have taken place. I would urge you to go faster and broader and wider, to quicken the pace at which research can be able to grow, particularly from our African continent. I want to talk about three things briefly before I conclude. One of the critical things that we have in this world that makes nations prosperous is research. Many of the countries that have developed highly, the basis of their development has been education and research. They have invested heavily, and you can see that from South Korea, you can see that from Singapore, you can see that from Israel and many other countries. They have invested heavily in research, and they have invested heavily in education. But research has various pillars. In my outlook to research, I see three main pillars that any academician and researcher has to be conscious of as they engage in research. The first pillar is that of identifying the problem or problems that need to be tackled. And this requires having a good understanding of the background and the trends in regard to that problem. And that touches on the literature review, investing time to search broadly and widely what has been done. It requires an understanding of the clarity of the problem, because you can have a problem, but that is never clear. It requires an outlook to the feasibility of the problem, the practicality and the reality that goes with the problem. Is it hypothetical? Is it going to touch lives and communities and systems that you are in? It takes looking at the objectives, the theories and the concepts that underlie what you are trying to deal with. That is one critical pillar. And in my experience in supervising students in teaching, I do recognize that Many of our researchers have problems at that level and on that pillar. Unfortunately, in the current generation, I do recognize that many of you are lecturers in universities. I realize that in the current generation, you get supervisors of graduate students who have no deep understanding on how to identify researchable problems. So that is a pillar that we have to keep going back to, even as we do our research, so that it's not just a quick fix to get a paper published and you don't know what that paper is for, but a situation whereby you have got something solid that will withstand the test of time. The second pillar is that of methodology and method. We talk about methodologies in the broad sense, and we talk about methods in the specific sense. It's an issue of how to address the problem. And the population that the results apply to, the instruments and their reliability, the analysis, not just saying that you're going to use SPSS. SPSS is a statistical computer program. It doesn't do the analysis itself. You decide what it will do. The third pillar is that of the solution to the problem, the results. And the question is here, is whether the results provide a realistic basis to solve the problem. The depth of the analysis is a critical element in the third pillar. More often in education and the social sciences, and to some extent in business, many people here in this country and in most African countries, the depth of the analysis of the results is never good. And understanding the history of our education system, you can appreciate or comprehend why that is the case. I'll talk about that later. But in this pillar, we have the issue of conclusions. Conclusions is not simply what you get from your results. It's what you get from your results and how it links to what others have done before you. That is very, very important. So that is a critical comparative dimension of conclusions rather than a one-line system that you want to follow. Beyond understanding, identifying the cause of the problem and the effects that underlie it, the question you ask on this pillar is, what are you developing as a solution? I realize that in most of the presentations, you did a good job in identifying the causes, identifying the effects, but very, very few people provided a solution that they have developed to effectively address the problem. Again, that's an unfortunate situation. The issue of applicability of the results is very vital in the third pillar. So as we look at research, those pillars carry the system that underlies research. It doesn't matter which field you are in. There are critical elements that one has to look at closely and effectively. And as we look at the issue of education and the social sciences and business in relation to sustainable development, it is a wide field. And by looking at each of those components effectively, it is possible to develop systems to come up with ideas that address the challenges that face development that is sustainable in our times. And particularly in a digital era where people are in a hurry, not to find a solution, but to find benefit from what they are doing. But as we look at research, I also recognize that we have a lot of challenges. Some of them I've identified from the presentations. I'll try to avoid looking at the specific papers until later on. But the first challenge is that many of you are finding realistic problems, very real problems, but you are keeping them very narrow for quick results. In a multidisciplinary era, which is also global, this puts doubt on the extent of the applicability of your results. Are you thinking, as you look at it as a social science problem, are you looking at how engineering systems work? Are you looking at how economic systems work? Are you looking beyond your social science and learning from outside? Because all these fields are connected. In the university where I did my PhD in Canada, I was doing a PhD in statistics, but I needed a course supervisor in mathematics, a course supervisor in computer science, and a course supervisor in economics, because it was felt that statistics doesn't stand on its own. It's connected. And I had to show that connectedness in what I was developing. And that's what we need to be able to do. We need to learn from other fields and engage the problem from more than one dimension. Go beyond the linear approach and look at the problem in a multidimensional system. Again, teaching mathematics has shown me that many of us have problems looking at things in more than one dimension. Research requires that you look at things in more than one dimension. The second challenge that we have is my urge to you. Do not avoid rigorous methods in solving problems, because this would broaden your understanding of the problem. What you find is that researchers in developed countries go into enough detail and across related fields and aspects to an extent that it fuels creativity and innovation. Do not limit your methods in terms of rigor. I know that many of us fear that if we do that, our colleagues will challenge us and will have no answer. But that is part of learning, that as we are challenged, we can be able to learn. Thirdly, the challenge of minimal use of technology in enhancing research and data analysis. We need capacity for data analytics and data science. We are still very weak in most of our research work in terms of the depth and breadth of data analysis. It seems low, even with those who could be helping you, your mentors. I've seen professors who cannot help their students in terms of data analytics. It means they also have their own problems. The question is, can you learn? Are you teachable? Can you learn how to really analyze your data? Maybe somebody else is helping you, but do you understand what they are doing? In developed countries, in most universities, you'll find that a PhD student often has to take 2 to 4 courses in statistics and research methods at PhD level, particularly in education, in social sciences, and in business. In Kenya and most of Africa, we give one course or sometimes nothing in statistics. And that weakens our capacity for research that has depth and that has impact. And it undermines our competitiveness as academicians and as researchers. The fourth challenge is addressing pertinent issues. In education, I recognize that a lot of research is going on, but there is a gap between knowledge and skills. I mean, skills in terms of that touches on the issue of curriculum and methods. I think I listened to 2 or 3 papers that touched on that. We have knowledgeable people who have no skills. And that's a challenge for our industries. Can we address that effectively and very, very closely? Of course, we address it knowing that skills requirement by industry is a dynamic factor. But we have focused on knowledge, on memorizing and reproducing, and we have missed the development of applicable skills. There is a gap between technical know-how and soft skills that touch on values, that touch on morals, that touch on good citizenship, and being a human being. Far too many people are humanistic, but they are not human in their nature. And those are issues that we need to address in our curriculum and in our teaching methods. 2 weeks ago, I was speaking in another conference on the need for a paradigm shift in education. And we recognize that for education to move forward and have its expected impact, we need a paradigm shift in our curriculum and in our teaching methods. We need a shift in the financing of our education. We need a shift in the management and leadership of our educational institution. And we need a paradigm shift in the policies of education and in their drivers. Unfortunately, most of the drivers of policies in education are politicians. Can we find a way to address this? And so what I'm saying in education is that we need to broadly address issues that affect education and its impact for sustainable development effectively. In the social sciences, I realized, as I mentioned before, there is a missing multi-dimensional outlook because social science is very wide, and the factors that interplay within social science are very, very many. And so we can't narrow ourselves to one thing and draw conclusions that we can effectively sell to policymakers. It is a call to critical thinking because of the diversity and width of that kind of field. In the area of business, I recognize that we face, in the presentations that we have, we face the challenge of sensitivity analysis. This may apply to some extent to the social sciences as well as to education. By talking of sensitivity analysis, you're looking at using interacting factors in such a way that the results can be tested at different levels on different posts so that they are able to apply under a dynamic environment. Business is very dynamic. And if you don't deal with the aspect of sensitivity analysis to look at pertinent issues, then that becomes problematic. As I said at the beginning, the presentations were relatively good. I do appreciate that, particularly in these times when people hold PhD degrees and yet they may not know anything about what that PhD certificate or thesis contains. So I'm really impressed by the presentations that we have had. Some of the specifics, I think one of the papers I listened in by Caroline Omlando and Wycliffe on students' acceptance and readiness to adopt e-learning. One of the things I expected to show up is, yes, the students do not have the computers, the students do not have the networks, the students do not have the bundles. But what we need to ask the students is, what are you doing about it? It enhances creativity to help them think outside their situation and look beyond. And it is us researchers that can challenge them. Yes, you have a problem, but what are you doing creatively to address this kind of problem? It's building creativity within our research system. In the social sciences, I listened to one presentation by David Asule, the impact of COVID-19 on homeless children. What I was asking myself is this study representative of Kenya? Because the title says in Kenya. Is this a representative of Kenya? I think it is an issue of methodology that we are missing out. And I realized this in quite a number of other presentations. Very, very few people were able to tell us how they got their sample, and particularly their sample size. Yes, it could be purposeful, it could be whatever, but what is the basis? It needs to be justified so that we can say, this is something that is representative, this is something that we can apply in our situation. For those of you who have read my paper, it's on genetics in the breeding of soybeans that we worked on some research, I think more than 15 years ago. It is a set of results that are used across the continent of Africa and beyond. Simply because the framework under which we operated alludes it or exposes it to be applied anywhere in the world. And so when you give a title that you're looking at the effect across Kenya, and maybe you have only done it in one county where you come from, it doesn't tell the story and it will not sell. In business, I listened to the paper by Dr. Gitahi Njenga on strategic drift and business performance. I hope he is out of the hospital now. But what I was trying to find is, did you try to shift the center from where you are looking at, the companies you are looking at, and looking at the extent of the effect of the drift in business performance? Again, that is a missing link. You can be a consultant to many companies once you addressed all those shifts so that they don't need somebody else to come and do another research. But you take care of that sensitivity analysis. In case of any shift, how does the performance shift? How does it, how do the strategies shift? I also listened to the business presentation by, who is this? Daniel Kuna from Cooperative University, if I'm not wrong. The determinants of tax compliance for micro and small enterprises. This is a very good study. But the question would be, what framework for compliance is being provided? I mean, what is the model that you are trying to develop that will enhance compliance and make it easier for the business people as well as for KRA? I also found it intriguing in your methods that you talk of a descriptive research method. But when you come to the analysis, you say quantitative analysis methods is a contradiction. Descriptive research speaks of the kind of data you collect. I mean, when you talk of descriptive research, it means you are alluding yourself to descriptive analysis, basically. But in this case, you have used a lot of quantitative inferential methods. Again, that becomes a problem in reconciling your methodology with what you are trying to achieve. I think I was biased a little in business because I teach business statistics, so I interact quite a lot with business. But also the presentation by Margaret Mwaura, Dr. Margaret Mwaura, and Mwaura on gender differences in academic motivation is a good study which has a lot of potential in addressing a lot of issues. But I was looking for you to speak on the factors that interact with the motivation, academic motivation. I didn't see them. I felt you were narrowing it too much to motivation. And at the end of it, you didn't give us a substantive solution to the problem. I think the focus on the boy child is critical, is a pertinent issue across this nation. But can you provide, as an expert academician, can you provide a pertinent solution that can be adopted by the Ministry of Education and other stakeholders in our system? Again, in education, I listened to Dr. Msheni and Jacinta on the issue of self-esteem and facilities in schools. I think this was discussed quite a lot in the room on the ex post facto design, and yet the facilities are fixed. I wonder if you thought of categorizing the schools with a certain level of facilities and looking at it in a much broader way. And what other factors interplay in self-esteem? It is quite wide. It touches on the socioeconomic dimensions and so on. And finally, for Dr. Kuria Wamukuru, one of our hosts, I was wondering if you evaluated the teacher capacity to teach to the level that you expected, because that is an important dimension that affects how students are able to read or write or to be numerate. So those are some of the things. My recommendation is if we can develop a framework to enhance training in research and statistical capacity. That is important. It is missing in a lot of academicians. And so it limits their capacity in research. And my hope is that your generation will not be part of that. Kenya can benefit greatly from research. And yet, our competitiveness as a nation and as a continent for research funding is very, very low. We need a generation that can enhance our competitiveness for funds that are there across the nations that would apply, that would be utilized in research. But that will require that we do a lot in terms of our research capacity, in terms of our statistical capacity, in terms of our multi-dimensional, multi-field research capacity, so that we can effectively be able to compete. The second thing I want to say is that let's encourage and continue to challenge one another in terms of our research, in terms of what we are doing, so that we even have forums that we can share, speak about what we are doing and where there is a missing link and how it can link with other fields to enrich our research as we undertake it. And so I want to say thank you very much once again for each one of you for what you have presented. It takes a lot of courage to make a presentation before your peers. And so I'm thankful that you had that courage to present and subject yourself to comments, to criticisms that will enhance and enrich what you're doing. And again, I want to thank the organizers of ESSRAK, the team that is behind this. I want to thank you again very much for the good work that you're doing in terms of researching these fields that are very critical in our times. So thank you very much, and the Lord bless you all.
Wonderful.